Hi everyone, Robert Peak here from the Spontaneous Dungeon Master, and I messed up. I recently had a session where I railroaded a player, and I didn't feel great. I am here making this video series about how I'm learning to be a better and more spontaneous dungeon master, how I'm learning to wing it, how I'm learning to be open to players really literally going anywhere and trying to create this open world kind of feel and experience. And yeah, I was playing with a younger player, and I kind of lost it a bit. So I want to talk about that in a minute, but really it got me thinking about all the mistakes I've made, I guess, over time as a dungeon master, and how mistakes and making mistakes and the fear of making mistakes and not knowing what to do when we do make mistakes can get in the way of being spontaneous and being present in the game and having fun. I just feel like we have to over-prepare or be perfect. I know that's happened a lot with me. So I want to talk about mistakes and when to apologize for making mistakes. Now, there are little mistakes. I constantly forget people in the turn order. I'm so sorry. I literally just say that. I say, whoops, I'm so sorry. Rewind. That's one of my words for like, let's go back a tick and let's make sure you get your turn. And I apologize about that. Definitely, call me on that one. General forgetting is an easy kind of whoops, sorry, right? Then there's the times when I forget a rule is written, or I make an interpretation of a rule, and later I find out actually I wasn't right. So often there, I'll just go back to the player. I'll say, hey, I had to make a call in the moment. I was trying to keep the pacing up, keep things going, and I made a mistake. Here's what the actual rule is. We're going to go with this going forward, the actual rule as written, for example. Then there's other stuff I've done that I feel silly about. I had a character who wanted to have their characters speak. I think it was abyssal or infernal or something, and I was kind of hearkening back to the early days of the very sort of Lord of the Rings inspired childhood games I was playing, and I'm like, how would your ranger have picked up infernal? Really, come on, that doesn't fit. Now, what I should have said, knowing what I know now, is cool, great, I love that. We're going to find out somehow later in the game how that all happened. You don't have to have a perfect backstory. What happens in the game is way more fun and interesting than something you've cooked up beforehand. You want it, I want you to have it, done. So, I'm sorry about that. I actually went back to the player, she joined a campaign months and years later, and it said, hey, you know what? I was way more uptight back then. I apologize. Very much, when I'm looking at trying to make a ruling or trying to incorporate things into the game, I'm looking these days much more at what's fair, what's going to be right for everybody, what's going to make sense for everybody, rather than my concept of what the game should be. But I did fall into that a lot early on, really in a way kind of railroading even the backstories of the players. So saying I'm sorry, I mean, to me it comes down to a couple of things. One, acknowledging the mistake. Two, I often feel like just a basic explanation of, hey, here's why, and here's what I was up to, and I realized that's a mistake. Like the thing behind it, was a mistake. And there's other little stuff too that I just feel like, saying whoops or sorry or whatever just really helps. Often, in being kind of a spontaneous dungeon master, sometimes I have to look stuff up, and I'm very aware that the tempo can be interrupted. So I'll just make a joke out of it. Please hold, or give me a moment, or character generation in progress, or whatever. And go and do the thing I need to do, and try and keep the tempo going. One of the things I think all of this comes down to is identity. And as a dungeon master, I know I've often had a sense of identity as having to be the one that knows it all, knows all the rules, knows all the canon, has it all wired in order to be kind of impervious to criticism, my own and my players. And the reality is that when you're trying to have a conversation or take feedback and it's about your identity, there's this whole thing in the Harvard Negotiation Project about identity conversations. And when you get to that point where you're butting heads about, this isn't just about the rule, this is about me as someone that knows the rules, you reach an impasse. You reach an impasse really fast. So I think for me, a lot of it's been about letting go of that thing, just going, look, I don't know all the rules, and another really important reason, I think, to say I'm sorry as a dungeon master is that there is there is a power imbalance going on between you and the players that I think is important to acknowledge. It's a very similar dynamic to teachers and students, right? Which is you have some authority, right? As a teacher, maybe you have authority over their grades, and maybe they care about that, or maybe they don't. But you have some authority over their fantasy, right? Their thing that they've invested their creative energy to, the fate in some ways of their player. And then they have a certain power dynamic in that there's a lot more of them than you, right? Just like a teacher, they can make your life hell, right? If they really want to, or make the game really not work. There's all kinds of RPG horror stories, on either sides of the table, about all of that. So at the end of the day, with this player, it was a younger player. They seemed kind of disengaged, and I had set up this very short kind of one shot, trying to keep their interest, and maybe talk about the dynamics of younger players potentially in the future. But I'd set up a little kind of a combat encounter. It's clear that's the way it was going, and he was like, "Look, I just want to hang out with my sidekick in the tavern." And so I confronted him, and I was like, "Hey, do you just not want to play? I mean, what's the deal? And do you want to sit this one out and watch the others play while you're in the tavern, or do you want to dive in? Because this is I prepared something over here that's the good stuff." So in theory, I was just reminding him of the D&D social contract, right? That you more or less kind of want to go along with where the good stuff may lie, or at least kind of say yes to what the other players are doing rather than just totally not engaging. But underneath that, I was clearly a bit grumpy. So we carried on with the session, but it was a moment. And he said, "All right, I jump in the water, I go in the cave, I confront the Shogun, and we resolved the session, and we still had fun." But afterward, I went, "You know what? I'm just going to apologize," and I did. And it felt right. It wasn't fun, but it felt like I was just kind of humbling myself and acknowledging I was playing a session under time pressure and was trying to lead to a good thing, and I just messed up. I got grumpy. I got out of balance. I lost my cool a little bit. And his response was, it's cool. I hadn't really noticed. I didn't notice. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But what he was basically saying was, it's cool. We're cool. It's good. Did it matter then that I said something, even though he was cool with it, or even though he said he didn't even notice it? To me, it did. To me, it mattered. That I'm calling myself on this stuff. That I'm noticing that the kind of DM I want to be is one, that's cool with it, that rolls with it, that doesn't have to be perfect, and that can recover and can make mistakes. To me, that's led a lot more to my being willing to be spontaneous, and to go for the fun sessions. I think also potentially, we can debrief this one later. Say, hey, do you just want to do more of a free play session? I was assuming that combat is the thing that keeps you interested, but we could have a shopping session. We could have a hanging out and doing a fashion show with your sidekick, or whatever you want. Let's reveal the assumptions behind what caused me to kind of make a mistake or misread the situation in the first place. Let's make those explicit. Let's debrief this, as well as just saying sorry, because sorry is just a guilt reliever sometimes. But learning from it, like actually learning something from it, to me often takes a conversation, takes thinking about it, which is why I've been thinking about this one. At the end of the day, D&D is like pizza. I mean, even when it's not spectacular and amazing and wonderful, it's still pretty great, right? Because it's pizza, it's D&D. It's a great thing to be involved with. And as a dungeon master, I think we sometimes forget that we're the ones that are enabling that to even happen for the players. We've got to show up at the table, right? It used to be you also had to have a cleric, but these days everybody's got some healing abilities. And everyone messes up. I'm willing to bet that Jeremy Crawford gets rules wrong sometimes, right? And if he's DMing a session, I mean, he's the guy that wrote this thing. So saying I'm sorry is a way of acknowledging that there's a power dynamic going on, that you don't have to be perfect, that they don't have to be perfect. And so my advice really is apologize early, apologize often. Don't make it a big thing like you're some horrible person, but make it an opportunity to learn something, make it an opportunity to be explicit about your assumptions, about what you were thinking, about why that happened, and talk it out. Talk it out like adults, talk it out at the more meta level about what's going on. Don't let it devolve into an identity conversation and butting heads about who you think you are or who you think you should be. Apologize. Just do it. It's temporary uncomfortableness, and sometimes these little things in the game, these little moments that just saying I'm sorry about, it clears the air and can make a huge difference. Sometimes the little stuff derails these wonderful campaigns that have been going on for a really long time. Don't let that happen. Just, say you're sorry, fess up, learn something, move on. Have a great game.